Tired?
Yes. And the darkness is still there. It's not because of the videos. I was thinking that after doing a few videos in a row, day after day, you guys might think that the negativity, the weight I was feeling might be caused by the video, but it's not. It's life. Let's talk about this IT200 engine. It doesn't bother me. I couldn't get the flywheel off, and I'm going to tell you how I did get the flywheel off eventually in a way that is very destructive but effective. And I think that this information may be useful to you motorcycle mechanics out there, but I hope you'll never have to use it.
Knowing what you know now, do you think you could have gotten it off with a different method?
I could have gotten it off perhaps with heat, by getting the flywheel really, really hot and then using a puller to take it off. But as I'm saying that, I think I take it back, because if I got it really, really hot, by the time I got the puller on there, it would have cooled down enough that it wouldn't be effective. Unless I heated it up with the puller already on. But irregardless, I wouldn't want to use the heat, and I didn't use the heat because I really wanted to save the stator, which is sensitive to heat, and it's mounted directly behind the flywheel. If you guys don't know exactly what I'm talking about, this engine came out of a 1986 Yamaha IT200 dirt bike. I thought I could get the machine running. I made a video about it. You can check out the video. I could not get the engine running, and I theorized that the reason for that was the flywheel was not indexed correctly on the crankshaft, so it wasn't sparking at the right time. The position of the flywheel on the crankshaft determines when the spark plug sparks. So I thought I'd take the flywheel off, put it back on correctly, and get the engine running. But I couldn't get the flywheel off. I tried really hard with a puller, destroyed the crankshaft beyond, well, I don't know if I destroyed it at that point, but I damaged the crankshaft with the puller. Watch the video if you're interested. I don't want to bore you guys that have seen that already. Anyhow, this sat around and I took some parts off of it that some people wanted to buy from me. But that flywheel, I really wanted to get that flywheel off so I could access the stator, because that's worth some money. And also just to see if my theory was correct, if the flywheel was actually on there incorrectly. So I thought about, how can I get that flywheel off? I got it off. I'll put a picture on the screen right now of how it looked when I first started working on this engine, how the flywheel looked. And here's how it looks now. What I did was grind off the rivets that hold the flywheel together. The flywheel is two pieces.
This is such a great story.
There's this inner part that goes in here. The magnets want to grab it, but you can see how that works. It goes in here and is riveted to this outer part, and the rivets come through here. Well, I grinded the heads off of all those rivets and then grinded here and here so I could get this puller on the flywheel. Tried to gain some purchase on it, but couldn't get those jaws in there. And you can tell by this point, I was ready to sacrifice the flywheel. If it meant I could access the stator, I'll sacrifice the flywheel. When I realized I couldn't get the puller in there that way, I grinded myself a couple notches, nice little notches here and here. Started cranking this down because the idea was if I could separate this part of the flywheel from what's on the other side here, then maybe I could grind it off, the remainder, because when it's on there like it comes from the factory, there's no access behind here unless you get the flywheel off, which wasn't happening.
So that method was about as effective as those arcade games with the claw. It didn't work.
It didn't work. So I started putting some pressure on here, and it didn't come off. Those rivets must be in there, must be attached really tightly. The tolerances must be really close, because I pulled and I could see the flywheel being pulled up on the outside and concave in the middle, and you might even be able to see a little bit of that if you get the camera angle just right. It's dipped down there in the middle. So I grinded on it a little bit more with my mini grinder, notched it here, because not only is it riveted, it's aligned onto this circular part too, which isn't a circle anymore. I fixed that. This was a circular hole here that went onto this circular part of the inner section of the flywheel. After enough grinding, it came apart. I put the puller back on here. It came apart, and I was left with something that looked about like that, or that. That's what remained, and the stator was behind there. So I took the grinder to it, took that off, and was left with this sleeve. This is the tightness. This is what actually holds the flywheel onto the crankshaft. Well, I ground the top of it off to release it. Baby, you just got to release me.
Did you release it? Release something?
Yeah. Grinded that off, and it separated. Success. I was able to remove the stator, and I didn't damage it in the process. In fact, the only things I damaged were the flywheel and the crankshaft. I thought it might be destroyed before. No, this is what a destroyed crankshaft looks like, but that's all right. It's a shame because the rod bearing is perfect. It feels like this is almost brand new, and it's not a factory crankshaft either. Somebody rebuilt this. I hope they got a little bit of use out of it before it slipped time, because I think that's what happened. And that brings me to the next part of the story. Was I right or wrong about the flywheel being on this crankshaft correctly? There's a key that goes into this notch of the crankshaft. It is meant to align with a channel in this piece, which is the flywheel. You know where that channel is?
I do.
Right there, about 70 degrees away from where it should be. And we can see the sheared off key, the remains of it in there. You see it?
I see it. I think it's got it.
This is important.
Oh, yeah.
I was right. And I think it was rust welded on there. If that even is something that could happen. It was stuck. We'll just say it was stuck. And it is rusty in here. So, if you ever need to remove a flywheel that's being stubborn, and you mean to be even more stubborn than it is, and get it off, this is what you need. Did I tell the story effectively despite my disposition?
Oh, yeah. I think it's a good story.
I'm feeling better.
This story warmed you up.
When a feller's in a bad mood, the best thing he can do is damage control. When I'm in a bad mood, just about everything she says is just about the most irritating thing I've ever heard in my life.
I think that's not just when you're in a bad mood, but thanks for giving me that much.
But if a guy can recognize that maybe I'm just in a bad mood and not respond to the provocation of the tone of voice that she just told me she loved me in really rubs me the wrong way, if I can just realize, hey, slow down there, touchy, that will save me a lot of trouble later when I'm no longer in a bad mood. That's the key. If you ever wondered what the key was, that's it. Don't give in to that poison that might try to find its way into your moment rather than just being in my mind. When I'm just irritated in my mind, I can shed it and move on to the next thought, or I can indulge it and say, what do you mean you made me my favorite dinner? So typical. Throw things. 3 signs that you're in a bad mood if you can't tell. Because it's hard to tell from this side if you're in a bad mood or not. You thought this was going to be a video about a flywheel, didn't you? 3 signs that you can tell you're in a bad mood is if you find yourself getting angry at the weather, at animals, if you want to kick the cat, or objects. If you start throwing things, punching walls, you might be in a bad mood.
Going back to dinner, does what I made tonight qualify as your favorite dinner?
It was a fine dinner.
Not your favorite, okay.
Everything you make is a gift. And I don't know that there is a favorite dinner. Taste is not the most important aspect of the dinners you make. You produce food for me. That's an act of love. And I'm immensely fortunate that somebody does that at all. If it happens to be something I enjoy or could pass on, is not a factor. Every dinner you make is my favorite dinner. I'm hot and cold. So, if anybody's still out there, we'll start taking apart the old Cub Cadet 1040 Easy, because the next video is going to feature a valve adjustment on the Cub Cadet. I think it might need a valve adjustment. A lot of you guys in the comments, as I mentioned previously, said the ticking noise that the engine makes while it's running sounded like loose valves. Some of you guys also said it could be an exhaust leak. You guys are so smart. If we come down here, I don't think this part is meant to have this contour.
All right.
It has sustained impact. And if we look over here, the tailpipe has been smushed. And if we look even closer, right where my little fingy is, there's soot where there shouldn't be. That's an exhaust leak. On the bottom and on the top of where this exhaust tailpipe, what do you call that? Snout? Right where it attaches to the muffler doodle.
I think it's just his nose.
Nose? It's a side nose. Well, I didn't take lawnmower anatomy in college. Hey, should we pull off that shield tonight? The more we do tonight, the less we have to do tomorrow night. I think I'm going to really turn a corner tomorrow, and I will tell you when I turn the corner, and then I think I will probably not talk about my feelings. But now that I've mentioned 2 nights in a row that I've got the darkness, I feel that I would be a little bit of a drama queen to not mention when it turns. That's only balanced. I'm guessing that these shield bolts are 3/8 because this is a half and half, metric and standard, which is fine. I think I need another extension.
Heavens.
We'll take this off. See what that muffler looks like. The valves are underneath this cover, which means this needs to come off to access the lower bolts here anyway, besides from looking at the damage to the muffler. That's kind of what I'm working on right now. I'd like to see what that muffler looks like. I can straighten that out too.
Good job.
Proud of me for that?
After what you did over there with that crankcase, whatever it was, the stator, the top of the stator thing, the other side of the stator thing, I would expect you would be able to straighten that.
Flywheel.
There.
Now this ought to come off. Now what are we hung up on?
And you ought to have liked my dinner too.
I loved your dinner. Did I say I didn't like it? I thought you asked me if it was my favorite, and I answered. I didn't answer the way you wanted me to.
I think fine is a funny word. It can both mean great and not great at all. How are you doing? Fine. I'm fine. How was your dinner? It was fine.
Just fine.
It was fine.
Oftentimes, the word fine is followed by the sound of a slamming door.
Yeah.
It is a curious word. I'm hung up here on the snout. This shield will not make its way around the muffler without more force than I want to exert. But then again, I think there's only one way out. Do I need to remove the muffler? Probably. That was loose. Okay. So the case bolts weren't loose, but we did find a loose muffler bolt. You know what I mean. How about over here? That's loose too. Whoa. Can you believe that? That might be stripped out. What if it is? That'll really make this video worth your time. Not stripped out. So I might just replace that bolt with a longer one, so maybe it can grab into some better threads. And the muffler's still tight on there. There might be a method for getting this off. Do you see my challenge? Do you understand?
Yeah, it's not coming off.
This prohibits this from escaping. And a guy has to remove the muffler just to get it off? Doesn't seem right. The workflow is cumbersome if that's the case. If I take off that muffler, I'll probably tear the gasket. And this is not worth buying a new exhaust gasket for. Don't think for an instant I'll buy a new valve cover gasket, despite that it's leaking. Oil all over the place. See this? Oil on the muffler dripping from the valve cover. When you start this thing up, it smokes for a little while, but like I always say, just because it's smoking don't mean it's broken. It's fine.
That is what you always say.
My mantra. What's your call? Should we quit right there? Should we take the muffler loose? See right here? 2 Torx head screws, bolts.
Yeah. I don't know.
There's only one way to rock. Take those off. We can dance around the obvious here, or just do it. One smaller. So we'll take this loose. Will I ruin the gasket? Wow! Loose! It might have had an exhaust leak here, although I don't think it did because I'm not seeing any soot. Why did they make these a Torx? Nothing else on here is a Torx. Maybe they thought it was too simple to just have metric bolts and SAE bolts. We'll use Torx too. There's the gasket. Still good. There's our muffler. I don't know if the exhaust leaking from there is what was making the noise or not, but maybe we'll take that apart and try to flatten it out again, how it goes. I'll probably do that tomorrow. Might video it, might not. Look at all the oil. But now our job tomorrow is very straightforward. We'll pull this cover off, have a look at those valves, see if they need to be adjusted. Wonder if I could take care of this right now. Just about. I was going to end it right here, but I take it all back. Cub Cadet, you know what you're doing. There was access for those 4 bolts right through the front of the shield if I would have just looked at it. Could have taken those off. The exit pipe could be removed, and subsequently the shield. So I took the muffler off for nothing, but I would never have known all those bolts were loose. So I thank the universe for that. And I thank you for watching.